Hi, welcome everyone. Good to hear you, everyone. We're just getting a little bit of feedback. See, we can stop that. Yeah, welcome everyone. Hey, welcome to our webinar number 4. It's quite bizarre being the fourth one. Feels like months ago we were kicking this off. So I suppose so much has happened over the last 4 weeks that we've been having these webinars. It's probably a chance for us, one, to do a bit of a recap on everything that's happened through the stimulus packages. Today we're going to cover off on some of those, just updating, I suppose, some of the information that's come through on those stimulus packages. Also, we're going to just have a quick chat to you about probably some of the topics that we're getting of recent times, and it's more around the rent, commercial rent, and residential rent as well. We'll just cover off on a few areas there. So, look, for me to start, the first topic that I just want to start with, I'm just going to have a quick chat to you and a refresh again on the cash flow boost, which is probably what a lot of people are talking about at the moment, as we're all just doing our BASs for the March quarter. Just remember that the cash flow boost, the payment's equal to 100% of your pay-as-you-go withholding. So your wages tax, with a maximum of 100,000 and the minimum payment being 20. So just remember, if you're under the 20,000, so for instance, if you're only for the month of March quarter, your wages tax was only 5,000, you're actually going to get the 10,000. So just remember, once again, it's in two boost payments. One in the March BAS of 10,000 would be your minimum payment, and then the next one again in the June BAS. There's no registration process for this one. You'll hear us talk about registration processes for other things, but for this one there's no registration, as it just needs the BAS to be done. So the payment's automatically calculated in the March, June and September, or the September BAS. Some questions we get around is, what about if can the $10,000 be used against other payments, like for example your GST? Yes, it can. And if there's still a refund, you'll get that within 14 days. So as I said, hey, look, this one's probably is topical for a lot of people because they're just doing their March BAS at the moment and lodging it. But just remember that you won't get any payments before the 28th of April. So 28th of April will be the first lot that will come through. Other stimulus package was the wage subsidy for apprentices and trainees. So this is offered under the Australian Apprenticeship Incentive Program. The wage subsidy will be 50% of the apprentices' trainees' wages for 9 months from the 1st of January 2020 to the 30th September. So the maximum subsidy amount per employee, so just remember the maximum subsidy amount is $21,000 per employee. So it's 50% of the wages, but there is a maximum amount of $21,000. Employers are eligible if they employ fewer than 20 employees and retain these apprentices or trainees. The apprentice or trainee must have been in training as at the 1st of March 2020. To register for this, as you can probably see on your screens there's a hyperlink there. Please just jump onto that to register. You can only apply for and receive the wage subsidy for apprenticeship scheme and JobKeeper package at the same time for the month of March, because after that you can't get both. So once you can get it both for March, but after that you either get the apprenticeship scheme subsidy or you get the JobKeeper package. I'm going to pass you over to Wendy. Wendy's just going to have a chat to you about the JobKeeper payment.
Afternoon, everyone. So my job this afternoon is to run you through the JobKeeper payment. It's an area that we've only just got a lot of information on. The ATO have been working feverishly in the background to try and get some legislation through with this. So there are still a few holes, but most of your questions we can now answer. So what is the JobKeeper payment? So it's a payment made to eligible businesses and not-for-profits affected by the coronavirus to support them in retaining their employees. The payment is $1,500 per employee to support the people that they employed as at the 1st of March 2020 who are retained in employment. So you have to retain these employees. Self-employed individuals are also eligible, as well as people who operate through a trust, company or partnership structure. Only those, for guys who operate through those structures, you can only register for one of you. So how much does my turnover have to drop to be eligible? So for businesses, your turnover needs to drop by 30%, and it's 15% for registered charities and not-for-profit organisations. How do you work out if your turnover has dropped? So what you need to do this is compare the GST turnover of any of the months from March 2020 to September 20, or the quarters that start the 1st of April or the 1st of July with the corresponding period in 2019. There is an alternative test where you don't have a relative comparison period in 2019, and that test will be brought out by the Commissioner of Tax, and it's a discretionary test. So if you've only just started up in business, what we need to do is we need to apply to the Commissioner of Taxation for his discretion and be able to prove that your turnover's dropped, and he'll apply that on a case-by-case basis. For everybody else, you need to actually pick an actual month. So you can actually pick the month of March and compare it to March 2019. If your turnover hasn't dropped in March, but in April you're starting to experience a significant drop in turnover, you can actually estimate your turnover for April and then compare that with last year's turnover and use that. So once you have satisfied the turnover test, do I need to do this for each period? The answer is no. Once you've satisfied the turnover test once, you do not need to retest yourself in later months. You will need to notify the ATO of your current GST turnover for the reporting month and its projected GST turnover for the following months. So once you register for the JobKeeper, you need to report your turnover for the ATO each month. However, if your turnover's gone up, it's not a problem. You don't disqualify yourself for the JobKeeper. You only need to become eligible once, and then you're eligible for the entire time period. The ATO are using this information just to monitor the economic impact of the coronavirus across Australia on a monthly basis. So if your turnover improves, say in September, and you've become eligible in April, you will still receive JobKeeper for the entire time. So how do I register for the JobKeeper package? A lot of you will have already registered your interest in the package. The proper registration forms to enrol become eligible on the 20th of April 2020, and it's an online form on the ATO website. They actually haven't given us an address for that form yet. They're probably still making it in the background. So in the next week, we should have an address for everybody to go and register. So do you need to tell your employees that you are nominating them? Yes. Before you enrol in JobKeeper, you need to let your employees know that you are choosing to nominate them as an eligible employee. They must agree to be nominated by you by completing the JobKeeper employee nomination notice and returning it to you for your records. So the ATO are making a form that your employees will each fill out to say that they are eligible to be nominated for this. The nomination form doesn't need to be provided to the ATO. However, you are required to keep this form as a legal requirement for your own employment records. So once the employees give you the form, you don't have to send that anywhere, but you do need to hang on to that for your records. Can I pick and choose which employees I pay JobKeeper to? The answer is no. The rules simply state that it is a one-in, all-in scheme, and all eligible employees must be covered by the employer. So what happens to employees who were stood down or are on long-term leave? So employees who have been stood down from work under the Fair Work Act may still be eligible to be paid JobKeeper as long as they're in your employment and met the eligibility criteria on the 1st of March 2020. And you will have paid them at least $1,500 for each fortnight you claim the JobKeeper payment for. So what happens to employees who have already been terminated? If you terminate an employee after the 1st of March 2020, you can re-engage them and they will be eligible for JobKeeper. If you want to claim JobKeeper payments for employees that you've re-engaged, you will need to confirm that they want to be rehired and participate in the JobKeeper scheme, re-engage the employees, ask them to complete one of those JobKeeper employee nomination notices and return it to you, and start paying them a minimum of $1,500 per fortnight. So when will I be reimbursed or paid the JobKeeper amounts from the ATO? So the payment, for the fortnights from the 31st of March to the 13th of April, you'll be paid this in May. For fortnights starting the 27th of April to the 11th of May, you'll be paid this in June. For fortnights starting on the 25th of May and 8th of June, you'll be paid those in July and so forth. So you can see there's a lag time. You actually have to physically have paid the employees before the ATO will reimburse you. Okay, so recently there's been some changes made to industrial relations laws to cater for coronavirus. So what are these temporary changes? So the temporary changes are employees who are covered by the modern awards are now include a Schedule X. So there were 99 modern awards changed, which covers a fair few of them. So Schedule X allows people to access 2 weeks unpaid pandemic leave and annual leave at half pay. So when can you access unpaid pandemic leave? So as a full-time, part-time or casual employee, you can access this leave and the leave does not need to be accrued. Who can take annual leave at half pay? Employees who have annual leave accrued, both full-time and part-time, are eligible to take leave at half pay. When do these changes apply? These changes are in effect now, and at this stage will affect employees from the 8th of April 2020 until the 30th of June 2020, and the government will look at extending this after the 30th of June 2020. So just to recap on that, there's been some changes made to 99 modern awards. All of these awards now contain a Schedule X, which allow people to take 2 weeks unpaid pandemic leave and their annual leave at half pay. So just be aware of this if you've got employees on modern awards, that this will affect them. And full disclaimer, we are not HR or IR lawyers. So if you want any more information on this, you might need to have a chat to Fair Work, or Ben Wright from South Gelder will be back with us next week. So save your questions for him. I'll now hand you over to Mark, who's going to run through the commercial leasing changes.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, once again, full disclaimer on this area of leasing. We don't mean to portray ourselves as experts. I think that's for the legal guys. So Ben Wright will be here to talk about that next week from South and Geldard. And you can also contact him as well for any specialist advice that you'd like. So commercial leasing principles. So basically there's a code of conduct. So it's really around those guys who've got retail, office or industrial property. Obviously it's between landlords and tenants. And it's there to negotiate amendments to the lease in good faith. It's for businesses with turnover of less than 50 million. That's what this code of conduct is there for, those guys. And it'll run for the period that the coronavirus is to be in place. So, and that's going to be determined by government, is going to tell us when there's an end date. So once I've satisfied the turnover test,
Sorry, that's out of order.
Oh,
Apologies.
sorry about that. There we go. What tenants does it apply to? That sounds better, doesn't it? What tenants does it apply to? So tenants who are eligible for the JobKeeper payment are basically automatic. So in other words, if you've got your 30% downturn in turnover, it automatically can apply to you guys. Also, it's tenants in financial stress or hardship as a result of COVID-19. Now, what is the definition of financial stress or hardship? Look, it is very general, but it is a business's inability to generate sufficient revenue as a result of COVID-19. So you can imagine that would capture a lot of people in that area for financial stress. Can the landlord terminate the lease for non-payment of the rent? The answer to that is no. And the landlord can't draw on a security payment for the non-payment of rent. So for instance, a bond, etc. Tenants must remain committed to the term of the lease, subject to any amendments made under the negotiated agreement. So there's got to be a commitment from both as well. So the tenant's got to remain committed to the term of the lease. Landlords must offer tenants reductions in the form of rental waivers or deferrals. So I'm going to talk about this one a little bit. So rental waivers and deferrals. How much do I have to waiver the rent for? So rental waivers must be no less than 50%. So I'm going to give you an example at the end, but just remember that a rental waiver, so you're going to basically give a rent-free period, must be no less than 50% of the rent payable. When does the tenant have to pay back the deferred rent back? So it is going to be spread over the balance of the lease or a period of 24 months, whichever is the greater. So if there's only 12 months left in the lease, hey, look, they're going to give those people 2 years to pay that back. If there's 3 years in your lease that's left, obviously, hey, look, the 24 months will be the period that you will, 3 years will be the period that you'll pay it back. There's no fees or interest can be applied to the deferral or the waiver amounts. That was one question that I had. And the tenant should be provided with an opportunity to extend the lease for the rent waiver period or deferral. So there's going to be a lot of negotiation period here as well. What other things should landlords consider? If there's any reductions in charges, should be passed on to the tenant. So in other words, land tax, council rates, insurance premiums and bank costs. So if there's been any of those reductions, should be passed on to the tenants. There should be a freeze on any proposed rental increases. The only exception to that is if your rent is calculated on turnover. So it's probably more in the retail space. For those guys who are in the retail space, their rent sometimes is calculated on their turnover. So that's the only exception there. Landlords must not apply any penalty if the tenant reduces the trading hours or ceases trade. So I just want to run through these two examples, and they probably give you a real feel of what you need to do if you are either the tenant or the landlord. So example number one, tenant has 100% loss of turnover. So basically had to shut the doors. The landlord must offer a 50% rent waiver or rent free period. Then the other 50% is deferred over 24 months. So just remember, 50% is basically a free period, 50% of the rent, I should say, and 50% of it then is deferred over a 2-year period. Example two, so remember that, hey look, 30% reduction, you're automatically in this code. So in this example where the tenant has a 30% loss of turnover, 15% of the rent is the rent free or the waiver, and the other 15% is deferred over the 24 months. So that just gives you a bit of a feel of what the expectation of the negotiation period and the code expects. Just remember, I just put up the slide there. Look, there's a lot in this stuff, and especially when you're getting to that negotiation stuff. So don't forget to please seek legal advice. I know the guys at South and Galdard are currently assisting lots of people with all these landlord and tenants issues, and they do have a deed, I should say, a variation with a fixed price of $1,500 if you'd like to get a deed of variation done to your lease. What if I'm struggling to pay my residential rent? So just moving on to residential rent. So the Queensland government has released the following measures. So they're putting a freeze on evictions due to rent arrears for 6 months for tenants experiencing financial distress due to the impacts of COVID-19. Also, they must work together. Look, at the end of the day, I think both commercial and the residential, in this case, they really want the landlords and the tenants to work together to try and nut out an agreement. Also, introducing a cap on break lease penalties as well. That seems to be a bit of a norm for them all as well. Is there any assistance out there to help me pay my rent? There is a COVID-19 rental grant available for Queenslanders who've lost their jobs due to COVID-19. And they don't have access to any other financial assistance. So the grant is a maximum of $2,000 and it'll be paid over up to 4 weeks of rent. And this grant will be paid straight to your landlord or your lessor in this case. The other one we're getting a lot of this week is that for those guys who are under a bit of financial pressure at the moment, is I'm saying to all you business people out there, hey, look, things might seem to be going okay for the month of March. Maybe now in April, you're really getting that effect of the downturn in your industry. Look, to survive, I really strongly suggest that you look at doing some cash flow projections. I think I mentioned this last week, but, you know, basically put a cash flow projection together. You can use last year's figures as a bit of a template. It's a good starting point. Set some goals, but make them realistic as well. Just consider, is there any other forms of additional income? You know, I know a lot of the restaurants are gone to takeaway. You've got to consider all your avenues that you can go to. And is there any savings to be made? Just look at the ins and outs of your expenses and see if there's any savings to be made. Look at all the deferrals that are around at the moment. There's lots on offer, banks, Now we just talked about the rent one. The ATO have been very obliging as well. So consider that, stick that in your cash flow, because I really think that you need to then determine what your break-even point is. Put that all in place so you understand what sort of income that you need just to break even. I don't want to see businesses out there just use their bank account as their break-even point. And monitor that performance. Hey, look, we don't know how long this is going to go for. So, hey, look, put your actual figures against your budget, and that might give you a really good feel of what you need to do to maybe amend those budget figures going forward as well. So, hey, look, in a bit of a wrap there, hey, look, please do one. I think it's going to become vital. Don't be proactive rather than reactive. Generally, when we get those sort of people, they probably are very much reactive and they've left it a little bit too long. I just suggest to you, be proactive, get on the front foot. With any of that stuff there, if you want us at SSP to help out, our advisory section is definitely here to assist you with that process, not only through the COVID-19 as well, but hey, look, we can help you beyond that and throughout your business life as well. Well, that's probably it for the presentation stuff. Wendy, we got a few questions there.
We probably actually would love some questions because we understand the JobKeeper stuff is really quite confusing and you've probably got 1,000 burning questions about that. So please send it through to us. We'll try and answer it as best we can. I've got some questions here already. And one of them was, when does the JobKeeper payment start from? Is it backdated to the 1st of March or is it the 1st of April? It is backdated to the 1st of April or the 30th of March. So that's the first pay period for the JobKeeper. Is the pay fortnight starts on the 30th of March and then it runs in fortnights after that for 26 fortnights. The next question I have is the JobKeeper payment in our income for the year or is it exempt? It's actually an excellent question. It is actually regarded as income for the year. However, you do not pay GST on the amounts as they come into your bank account. And
if you think about it, it's probably in and out, isn't it? So you receive it from the ATO as income, but as you pay it out in wages, it becomes an expense. So it has a nil effect on your overall net profit.
Yeah. And this is actually the opposite to the employee cash boost one because that's actually exempt income.
Yeah.
So the first lot you'll get in your BAS from the 28th of April based on your PAYG wages withheld, that's exempt and there's no GST on that. The JobKeeper one, you do pay tax on it, but as Mark said, it will net off and there's no GST on that either. And I've got one last question here. And is anything happening with Queensland land tax as the same as New South Wales? And I've just done a quick search and unfortunately the answer is no at the moment.
Right, yeah.
So
a couple there.
Okay, so next question. The half pay holidays, is that so staff can get twice as many holidays? What it's probably designed to do is to probably design if you want your staff to take some leave, if you're finding it hard, keeping them engaged and you want them to take some leave, that they can probably take twice as much time and you only pay them the one amount.
Yeah, so I think it's periods where there's probably not the workload there. And you don't need as many of the staff there. It's an opportunity for them to maybe take holidays, go home, teach the kids their schooling or whatever it might be, and you only have to pay them half pay for that period, which is really not costing you any more than what it normally would. I believe that's really the idea there.
Okay, next question. Does a JobKeeper go by cash or accruals?
Well, I think to me, a good question. There's been a bit of debate around this one.
There has been a bit of debate around this one. It's actually what they're measuring turnover on is actually your GST reporting method. So if you report your BAS on a cash method, then they're looking at your GST turnover based on that. If it's on accruals, then they're looking at that.
Yeah. And I think Wendy had a slide that she mentioned in there that it was reporting it just on your GST basis. So whatever you're reporting GST wise is what you're going to report this one on.
Okay, the next question is an awesome question. So with the apprenticeship subsidy, we have more than 19 employees, but they are not all full-time. Only 8 are full-time. Are we still eligible?
Good question.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the answer is here, and I'm pretty sure
I think that
it's fewer than 20 full-time employees. So the account's based on your full-time employees. So if you have less than 20 full-time employees, you are still eligible.
Yeah. You know,
Okay, so the question is, if we usually pay our employees weekly, can we pay the JobKeeper weekly as well, or must it only be paid fortnightly? No, it can be slotted in to your normal pay period. If you pay weekly, fortnightly or monthly, you can continue to do that. The dates are just worked out based on a fortnight starting on the 30th of March for reimbursement from the ATO.
Yep. Wendy, do you want to just quickly, while we're talking about that subject, just talk about how they're going to handle it through their software?
Yes, that's a good question and I actually asked Mile this question this afternoon.
Oh, right.
And at the moment, Mile and the other software providers actually haven't been approached by the ATO to make any changes in the software. So as far as I'm aware, what you will do is you will register your interest with the ATO on the ATO website, and that you can do that from the 20th. And then on the 5th of May, there will be a form that you actually fill in through the portal. And then I believe each time you pay employees, you'll pay through single touch payroll and it will pick up. But we're not actually sure the mechanisms of whether you then have to report separately to the ATO of which employees you paid JobKeeper for, or if it will be inbuilt into your software. So we're still waiting for that to come out.
Yeah, because some of them are going to be eligible and some might not be eligible.
That's right. So eligible employees are, people who you pay the $1,500 to, people who are more than $1,500,
over the age of 16.
Over the age of 16, full-time. You may have a casual that has only been with you for 2 months who won't be eligible, and the rest of your staff will. So the ATO will need some way of picking that up, and we're not entirely sure the reporting mechanisms for that yet. That's what we're waiting on. But yeah, I just spoke to Mom just before I came in here, and they have not heard from the ATO yet as to whether there's something to put in the software for it. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, next question. I'm a sole trader not receiving any income. How do I claim the JobKeeper payment if you can't show any payment to claim?
Yeah. So you'll still be able to register for the JobKeeper payment as a sole trader, being self-employed, and you just have to nominate what your income is. So in this case, you would put your register as a sole trader. It could be a partnership. They all sort of coming under that same category, sole trader, partnership, or even a trust or a company. It's just that out of all of those entities, only one person can nominate themselves to get the benefit of this JobKeeper payment. Sole trader, obviously, there's only one. For the partnership, there's only one person can get that. So even though there's obviously two partners or more in a partnership, only one is to receive it. Same for a trust and a company, especially in the situation where a company, the owners in it might not pay themselves a wage. They might live off dividends maybe from out of that company. But to answer your question, yes, you still register for JobKeeper payment, and then you just nominate your income. So if your income is down for, say, March compared to March last year, you would be then entitled to the $1,500 a fortnight. If it's not March and it happens to be April, you would just provide that information in April, and then you'll get the payment after that.
Okay, next question's a really good one. Should we be paying employees $1,500 from now, even if we don't know yet if our turnover is down 30%? What if it turns out we aren't down by 30% and have paid the employees extra money? The answer to this question is probably until we can establish that your turnover is down, I wouldn't necessarily go ahead and pay the $1,500 to your employees because while the ATO has allowed for you to guess, like they're allowing you to estimate your income for April, May, June, or just April and compare it to the previous year. And if you're out by 5%, they're probably not going to worry. But if you're out by a large amount, they will actually ask for any money for JobKeeper back. And I think we all know that getting money back from employees is probably a lot harder than giving it to them in the first place. So I wouldn't go ahead and actually pay anybody the $1,500 until you can establish that you're going to be down by 30%. And keeping in mind, we can be projecting and using our projections to work out if you're going to be down by 30%, providing we have a good basis for doing so. So it may be something you want to get in touch with us and have a chat to us, and we can probably work out a formula to work out your April income.
Yep.
It's a really confusing area that, like, for most people, the impact of the coronavirus in March may not have been too bad. March may have been business as normal, especially for 3 weeks of March. It may have been the last week, which probably hasn't put you down 30%. But April seems to be where everybody is feeling it. So we may have to work on what's actually happened for the first 2 weeks in April, what we think is going to happen for the next 2 weeks in April based on what happened for the first 2 weeks, and then compare it to last year. And I should say that April is the only month that the ATO will allow you to do catch-up payments for JobKeeper. So you can actually do a catch-up pay period, and once you work out that your turnover is going to be down 30%, you can do a catch-up period and then they'll reimburse you. But April's the only month that they'll allow that to happen because they realise everybody's still trying to bed all this information down. Okay, next question. We have a casual staff member who is regular but doesn't work every week. So he will work for a number of weeks and then we have a couple of weeks of no work. Will he be eligible?
Yes, I was just having a bit of a read on that one. Yeah, look, it's a very confusing area. Don't get me wrong. Look, what's right and wrong? This one's going to be one of the very, very hard tests. But it's all about consistency, what I can read. An example that they use where a guy worked, 1 week of 1 month, didn't work for the next couple of months, and then worked the week of the next month and the next month, and then missed a couple more, a little bit like the situation you got, and they weren't eligible. So I really think that they're looking for that consistency. So if you had a situation maybe where they worked a couple of weeks of every month, I don't have a problem with that. But where they might miss months, for example, I think you might find there could be some issues around that one there. So look, hard one to answer, to be honest. It's probably a bit of a case-by-case basis. We might have to help you out and try and get an assessment done for that one there.
Okay. So next question is, if an employee doesn't want to receive the JobKeeper as it affects their Centrelink, can they choose not to receive it?
Well, it's a one in, all in.
One in, all in situation.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole idea of this is that, don't forget, the two officers will be talking to each other in this situation. So if this person will get the JobKeeper payment, so I think you'll find that they will find they'll get a reduction in their Centrelink payment.
The one thing that I did work out of a webinar we watched earlier today with some more detail in was that if an employee usually earns less than $750 per fortnight, per week, sorry, I'll get that right at some stage. If they usually earn less than $750 per week, they can choose not to nominate themselves or become an eligible employee, and you can keep on paying them less than $750 per week.
Oh,
But if you get the JobKeeper for them, it is mandatory that you pay them the $1,500.
Yep.
So I imagine that may answer that question there, because they may already have a low rate of pay.
Yeah.
They will probably be better off on JobKeeper than Job Seeker, because I think Job Seeker plus rental assistance is still less than what they would get with JobKeeper.
Yep. So what the government's trying to do here is trying to get everyone on at least a minimum amount of $750 a week is really what they're trying to create here. Is that the lot? Oh.
Okay, there's one more question. We put a casual staff member off when we had no work for her. She has been receiving Job Seeker from Centrelink for the last month. Do I have to back pay her the JobKeeper money if I'm claiming it for other staff? If you want to rehire her and then pay her the JobKeeper money, then it depends on the date that you rehire her as to whether you have to back pay her or not. Is that your take?
Yeah, that's right. Because remember that you can't get both. So the important part here is that you can't get both JobKeeper and Job Seeker. But yeah, I think the importance here is the date that the person would start working for you or reworking for you.
So yeah, you can rehire her and then she can come on to JobKeeper. Probably the most important thing is that she had to be an employee at the 1st of March 2020. So if you put her off before then, the answer is probably no. If you put her off after that, then you'll start paying her the JobKeeper from the date that you rehire her. You won't have to backdate it.
Yeah.
Because she would be doubling up that way.
So dates would be very important in that one there.
Okay, so will our reporting for JobKeeper be based on the month of March or the March quarter? No, it's specifically based on the month of March. It actually excludes the March quarter.
Yeah.
So just 1 month there. And then you can either do months afterwards for April, May, June, or you can project the whole quarter and compare it to the quarter last year's turnover.
Yeah. Because we thought originally when it first came out that we could do a whole period, like a quarter, but it's just for the month of March.
Okay, next question. If the staff member had 2 jobs, still has 1 job, can they get the JobKeeper for their second job?
So,
you guys have hard questions today.
So I'm assuming that they're probably a casual person in this situation. So if the staff member has 2 jobs, still have 1 job, can they get the job for their second job? So it can only come from one employer. So that's the important thing. So usually it's the dominant income area. I would say that it would, but it can only ever come from one. So you just got to talk to that employee about if they, especially if they're casuals, if you know that they work somewhere else, you need to talk to them about are they getting JobKeeper payment from somewhere else.
Yeah. However, I've seen nothing in the legislation that precludes somebody from getting JobKeeper payment at one place and then doing 5 casual hours at the next place and getting paid for that. There's nothing there that stops that I've seen at all.
No, I don't think there is either. Anything I've seen. No.
Okay, is there any more questions, and are they hard? Okay, next question. So if we aren't eligible for April, but we will be eligible for May, do we apply now or wait? We are still receiving money from work we performed in February. Okay, so if you aren't eligible for April, but you think you will be eligible for May, you can apply now. It doesn't mean you actually have to take it up straight away. So you can apply now or you can wait. The only month that they will back pay you for is the month of April. So if you're not eligible in April but are eligible in May, your fortnight's payments will start for May. You won't get paid for any wages you paid in April.
Yep.
So hopefully that answered that one.
There were some tough questions today.
Very tough questions. It's a very hard area to get your head around. So we'll give everyone another few minutes and keep on shooting in questions. If you've got any more that you would like answered, we're more than happy to answer them.
Yeah. And look, just to give you a little bit of an update, we had a chance to look at some webinars this week, and one particularly today. Probably gave us a bit more detail on the registration process, timings around that registration. We only really just finished that webinar before we walked into here, so we might be able to give a little bit of an update on that as well. It was probably designed for the accountants to assist that, and it talked about not only providing the income, say for the month of April, you also have to try and project incomes as well. So I talked about projecting incomes as well. So it was really wrapped around that whole registration process and how you negotiate that part, I suppose. And talking to your employees also, because you've got to also tell them that you're also registering for the JobKeeper payment, or they're going to get the JobKeeper payment, I should say.
So there will be a flurry of new forms very soon. There'll be the registration process on the website. There'll be the form that your employees need to fill and that you need to keep on their records. You don't need to send that to the HO. And then starting the 5th of May, there will be some forms to fill in on the HO portal, reporting income, etc., etc. So I see we've got another couple of questions. Okay. So can you please just explain again how we work out if we are down 30%? Does it go on the GST paid for the month? Okay, so to work out if you are down 30%, you need to look at your income, which is based on your, what they call GST turnover. So all of your sales for the month, and it can actually include the sale of capital items as well. So just bear in mind, if you sold a car or something during the month, you may need to include that. There are some way out things that you might have to include, but you can look at your sales for the month and you need to compare them to the previous year, same month. So March 2019 sales, you need to compare to your March 20 sales. And same with April. Only remember for April, we may have to do some projections because we're only 2 weeks of the way through April. But if you know the first 2 weeks of April have been dismal compared to the first 2 weeks in April in 2019, it's probably time to give us a call so we can do a projection to work out where you're going to end up.
Yep.
Another question. Okay, so with a part-timer on a wage subsidy program already with the government, will they lose that if they get the JobKeeper payment? So with a wage subsidy program, do you mean that, I'm assuming you mean like the $20,000 employment grant, or do you mean an apprenticeship?
Yeah.
Darlene, can you just shoot us in what sort of wage subsidy program you're talking about so that we can answer your question really well for you? Hopefully.
Is there anything available for franchisee payments? I haven't seen anything come through. Whether you can negotiate then, I know a lot of the amounts is usually determined on turnover, the franchisee payments. That might be the only concession that you might get out of that one, but I haven't seen any code of conduct like they have with the whole rental one around franchisees and franchisors anyway.
The wage subsidy is an employment grant.
Yeah. I haven't seen anything to say. The only one would be the apprenticeship one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you can't have that one and the job seeker.
No, I haven't seen anything to say that he can't get JobKeeper.
No.
Yeah.
We might try and find that one out anyway, Darlene, for you.
The youth grant, yeah. I think I believe he should still get both, Darlene, but we might just have to look into that one a bit more.
Yeah.
Elle, you're right. There are lots more forms coming our way for all of this compliance at the moment.
Just talking about forms. So just to give you a bit of a feel, and we haven't had a chance to stick this in this slide today because we've only just found this out. But as far as the registration process goes, it's an online application available through the ATO. So it is going to be available from the 20th of April. But for you to get the May payment, it's got to be completed by the 26th of April. So it just shows you timing. So I think it's, what's the 15th today?
Yeah,
16th, 15th. So 5 days. So Monday, it will be available online. But then by the 26th, you have to have that completed if you want to have it as part of your May payment.
And as well as completing it, you also have to pay your employees the amount. So you may have to do a catch-up pay in there as well.
That's right. And part of that process is you've got to determine who is eligible.
Yeah.
So some of the questions that we've just had to me were a little bit yes and no as far as eligibility goes. So you'd have to get try and find some facts around the eligibility as well for those couple of employees.
Probably the other question that I have heard asked is, how do I put this through my payroll? I believe that the ATO are going to give us some more guidance on this so that it can be picked up in single touch payroll as well. But they may be requiring you to make an allowance code in your wages so that it's exempt from certain things when it goes to the ATO. And one of those will be looking at super guarantee to make sure it's paid right. So you might need to reach out if you haven't heard from us next week on how to properly put this through payroll. Naturally, there'll be a bit of slack given for the first few pays until we work it all out and until the ATO work it out themselves. But if you are setting up some new payroll categories for this, you may need to reach out and just work out whether you're paying super on it, whether you're not paying super on it, and how you set up properly through your payroll system, through your software.
Yep. Yes. No, please talk to us about that area. Yeah. So I know some people have registered their interest already. I'm sure they'll probably get an email or be contacted at some stage by the ATO as from the 20th. But hey, look, the 20th is probably the next really quite important date for us. Yeah. Or 20th till the 26th, so that we can get those registrations in.
We just have another question come in as we're chatting then. I have a staff member who can't work from home due to having kids home. I feel her pain. And doesn't have babysitters. She has JobKeeper payments as well as a family payment. Job seeker payment, as well as a family payment. Do I have to offer the JobKeeper as she has indicated she can't work? Depends on what sort of employee she is and if you've stood her down or what you've sort of done. If she was a casual employee that you stood down, you don't necessarily have to.
No. Well, just remember you can't have JobKeeper and Job Seeker.
So it's one or the other.
So it's got to be one or the other in this situation. That's probably the first thing to determine.
So she's a casual that's been stood down.
Yeah. So in her case, I would say that if she was to go, if you wanted to rehire her and get her off Job Seeker, she would, have to come off Job Seeker onto the JobKeeper payment. She could go that way.
Yeah. And the other thing to remember is she had to be in your employment on the 1st of March 20. If you'd stood her down before that, she's not eligible.
That's right. Yep.
It's a really important date, that 1st of March 20.
It is.
Really important.
It is. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we've answered some of your questions. Some of them I wish we could answer a bit more thoroughly, but if we haven't answered it in full, we will try and get back to you, and hopefully in the next few days we should have a lot more information coming out on this. We're getting flooded with information all the time, and the ATO really are playing catch up, trying to put it into place in the background as we speak pretty much. Next week, just a plug for next week, we will continue to do these seminars for probably as long as you guys are happy to have us. So next week we're going to have Ben Wright back from South Galdard, who will run through some of the IR stuff that's coming up in regards to this. So that new Schedule X, it's quite a funny name for a award schedule, Schedule X. The new Schedule X Ben will go through, and he will also go through the leasing and rental principles a little bit more. That's his area of expertise. So he'll be here, so have your questions ready for him.
Yep. And hey, look, can I just reiterate to say, hey, look, when we talk about a lot of this stuff, it's probably not advice. We need to know all the circumstances, especially when it comes to the IR and, you know, the stuff that I went through today on commercial leasing. There's definitely no advice there. It's just information only. Please contact a specialist, someone like Ben, who can help you out with any of those more legal areas.
The other area we're hoping to cover either next week or the week after will be looking after your own and your employees' mental health, and just how to deal with that at the moment in this challenging time. Yeah.
And the other one we hope to do is for those guys who are unfortunately concerned about going into liquidation or bankruptcy. So we hope to have an expert in that area as well. We hope to keep you out of that. And once again, hey, look, please do your cash flow projection. Come and see us in the advisory, and we can help you with that area out as well. Let's get through this whole period. But hey, look, trying to predict the future, I know is hard, but at least if we can predict it, at least we know where our bottom line is. And I think that's going to be quite important for us as well. Well, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for all those questions. It does make it very interesting when you do give us the questions. Puts us under a lot of pressure. But, hey, look, it's what we want to hear, because we are trying to then formulate some of those questions as part of our slides from week to week as well. So thank you for participating in it, guys, as well. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
Good afternoon.
Bye.